Gino, welcome to the Do Nothing podcast.
Thank you, Rob.
Are you excited?
I am excited.
You love doing
I
interviews.
love doing interviews.
I'm curious about that. Why? What is it about interviews that have kind of kept you on the sidelines?
It's a great question. I am an introvert. I am a little bit of a mad scientist. I prefer to kind of be behind the scenes, so it surprises people that I'm an introvert because I do speak from time to time, and I'm certainly in front of my clients doing my work. And so whenever I'm teaching, you can't shut me up, but otherwise I'd rather be in the lab creating.
When did you realize you were an introvert?
I would say I was 25 years old after taking the Myers-Briggs. Mm-hmm. And I said, wow.
So you took the profiling and there's something that clicked with you at that moment? Was there something leading up to that before where you felt like, because sometimes introverts don't like to be in sort of crowded places or around a lot of people. They need their space.
Yeah, for
Did
sure.
you realize that about yourself?
No, it was, again, after taking Myers-Briggs, my mentor suggested that I do it. And what I realized up until then, and really most of my 20s, is I was faking it. I just thought that that's what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to talk to people and be able to talk to people and socialize and enjoy that and go to a cocktail party and small talk. And so it was enlightening with Myers-Briggs, but it still took me another, I would say 5 years for it to really sink in and accept the fact that, I'm an introvert.
Mm-hmm. So almost until you were 30?
Yeah.
Wow. Your mentor who was that?
Sam Cupp, an amazing man, God rest his soul, who built his companies up to about $300 million and just took me under his wing. And
how'd you meet Sam?
He was introduced to me by my dad.
Mm-hmm. And had you guys known him a long time? My
dad had known him. He was in the car business, starting with a dealership, and then kind of built an empire that managed fleets. And so my dad would buy his cars from him for probably, I would have to guess, 5 years. And so they formed a relationship. And as I took over the family business and was doing the turnaround, my dad thought that Sam would make a great mentor for me.
Mm-hmm. Did you know him prior to that growing up,
I did
though?
not, no.
So your dad was buying the cars, but you didn't know anything
Exactly.
about that? Okay. Interesting. And so your dad asked Sam, will you spend some time with young Gino?
Mm-hmm.
And were you excited about that?
I think I was probably terrified by that. I can't remember the exact emotion going back to that time, but I remember being in awe of him, and I remember being excited, but probably more scared to death. And after that first meeting, it just felt so right, and he saw something in me, and like I said, was willing to meet with me. We met every month for a couple hours for years, and he taught me everything he knew about business.
Where was your first meeting?
I couldn't even tell you. I think it was at his dealership in his office. But the reason I can't remember, because my 20s were a blur, but where most of our meetings took place was in his new office. And so when he moved out of the dealership and as he was building his empire, he was in a large office building in this beautiful office. And so what sticks in my mind most is me sitting in his office with him. And so as I look back, those first couple of meetings I think were at the dealership, but I just don't recall.
Do you remember what you talked about at your first meeting?
Couldn't even tell you.
How did you prepare for it?
Couldn't even tell you.
Did you bring a yellow notepad?
Yeah, of course.
Did you?
I'm sure I did. Are you kidding me? I bring that everywhere I go. It's sitting right there, by the way.
What is the origin of the yellow notepad as it relates to you?
So, for your audience, I think it's important they know that I always have a legal pad and a pen with me. And so the origin probably goes back to Sam Cupp, my mentor. Not that he taught me to use a legal pad, but everyone has a place that they kind of capture things. And for me, it's a legal pad. And so it's really high-tech people, they kind of laugh at that. But once you understand how it's used, you can do it with technology, you can do it with a legal pad. So the origin is, I wish I could tell you perfectly, but I just love to write. And what I learned at a very early age is when you write, things tend to sink in better. So my dad would always describe it as it goes up your pen, through your arm, into your brain. And so I just believe in writing, and I don't believe in typing. And I believe, you just don't retain as well. And there's science on it. I mean, there is science that says when you write it, you retain it. So I just love to write. When I'm thinking, when I take my clarity break in a Starbucks for 2 hours, I'm always just kind of pondering and thinking on a legal pad. And so long story short, what Sam Cupp taught me is a discipline, and he called it a to-do list and a today list. And the to-do list is just obviously all of your to-dos. The today list is everything you've got to get done today. And what I did is I took that and evolved that into the way that I prepare for every day is I sit the night before every day with a legal pad, and I lay out my day top to bottom. From the moment that I get up and start to work or jump in the car, the calls I need to make, the appointments I need to do, anything I need to get done is literally laid out in a linear fashion on a legal pad. And the power of that, and again, you can do that with technology, so both work. But the power of that, and what I've learned, because I've been doing this for 25 years, when you plan your day the next day, when you go to bed, for some reason, I don't know how to explain it, but your brain is already kind of working while you're sleeping, and your subconscious is working on everything that you're going to do the next day. And so I lay it out the night before. I sleep better as a result of it. I wake up better prepared as a result of it. And then I get up and I hit the ground running, and I work from that legal pad. And then throughout the day, as I have my phone calls, have my conversations, do my sessions, whatever I'm doing, ideas come up, commitments I make to people come up, and I just jot it on the legal pad. And then at the end of the day, I'm transferring all of those commitments, all of those to-dos, all of those new things into either the to-do list or the next day's today list. And so it goes all the way back to probably right around 25 years old. I wish I could tell you the perfect age, but it's just been a great tool for me to never forget anything. Excuse me, honor all of my commitments, and be better prepared every day mentally.
And Sam taught you that process?
He taught me the to-do and the today list, and I applied that today list to the legal pad.
I see.
And where, like I said, you could do it with technology.
Where did you start? Where did you start believing that this idea, when you were writing it down, was seeping into your subconscious overnight? That was getting you set up for the next day. Where did that hit your consciousness?
I would, if I had to guess, I'm guessing it was much later, probably 10 years in, I realized, because somebody asked me that question, because I have high-tech people that laugh at me when they see me, building an empire with a legal pad. So probably mid-30s, and when clients would ask, I just realized that that's what it was doing for me. So it's not like it was something I read. It was not like something somebody taught me. But I think with all of the reading I've done and what I've learned, I think there's threads of it in there where it just kind of all clicked, and I realized that that's what it does for me is gets me well prepared while I'm sleeping.
When you were in high school, what exactly were you like?
I was a lot of fun.
Uh-huh.
High school to me was just a party. It was an opportunity to have a lot of fun. It was not an opportunity to learn. Barely graduated high school. Graduated with a solid 2.3 average. Did not go to college. Would not go to college. College is not for me. I'm not college material, and could not wait to get out of academia for what that's worth. And so high school was a blast. And I had really good close friends, and we lived life to the fullest. And can I stop there?
For now.
Yeah, okay.
Did you have siblings? Do you have siblings?
Yes. I have a younger brother, older brother, and about 10 years ago, a newfound half-sister that is the daughter of my mother. That has been the most amazing addition to our family.
What was that like when you found out later in life that you had a half-sister?
Well, for me, I'm feeling it right now. It was when my mom shared it with us, and so she invited the three boys to dinner and broke the news to us. Not broke the news to us, shared the news with us, expecting us to, be shocked or whatever. I just immediately felt for her and thought to myself, because she had to give her daughter up for adoption, I just thought about the 50 years of wondering. They both tried to find each other for many years, but I just immediately went to how that must have felt for her for 50 years to wonder where that little baby is. So that's what it was like for
Your
me.
mom, Linda, when you were growing up, now that you know this, that there was, that you have a half-sister, were there any indicators to you that something was off or missing with your mom in any way?
No, not that. No.
What kind of mom is she and was she?
Incredibly wise, incredibly strong. She's really an amazing woman. She got MS later in life, in her 40s, and thank God later in life because it tends to progress slower. But she was a fanatic about working out and taking care of herself, and then she was diagnosed in her 40s. Well, fortunately, it has not progressed, like I mentioned. She's now in her mid-70s, walks with a cane, but she's just this amazing force of wisdom and strength that I feel so loved and so in awe of her. It's the best way I can describe it.
When you were in high school living it up, did you feel that as well? And was
No,
there
so
any angst?
it was different because my parents, and thank God, they gave us so much freedom. They just let us run. And if they tried to put structure around me, I would have revolted. And so they just gave us a lot of rope to go explore and be and live, and thank God, because it is a big part of what has made me who I am as an entrepreneur and just fully being me. So they were great parents.
Were your siblings similar to you?
Oh, yeah.
Yo.
I was probably the craziest. I mean, who knows? You'd have to ask them. But we all had that level of freedom. My younger brother was less crazy, but yeah, we all got that level of freedom.
So your dad, Floyd, he was on board. They were a team. Would that be fair to say? I mean, they were on the same page.
Oh, very much so. And so my dad tells a story, and he tells this from the stage. He's a Hall of Fame speaker of the National Speakers Association, amazing guy.
Yeah.
So he tells a story about how when he and my mom would come home, as they're getting out of the car in the garage about to walk in the house, my mom would say to my dad, "Now, honey, don't ask any questions." And then my dad describes it as he wants to open the door, go in the house. What's been going on? What's been going on? Where they just, again, gave us that level of freedom and didn't ask. So it's really cool.
Some people, when they're not good students in high school, their self-confidence goes down because they're day-to-day, they're failing in a sense based on the school system. Did you feel that way at all?
Oh, for sure.
You did.
I was so lost, insecure, absolutely. Because again, you're in this system, this school system, and you're being told that the next step is to go to college, and everybody needs to do that. And so as all my friends went off to college, I'm saying there's no way on earth I'm getting out of this system. I'm going to go be free. I'm going to go make money. I'm going to go. So yeah, incredibly insecure and so different and so lost. And yeah, it was tough.
How much were you gleaning off your father's, your father being a professional speaker and building this training business? I mean, were you like aware of what was going on?
Not in the
No.
least. I didn't know what he did
No
for
kidding.
a living until I was, I mean, I knew what he did, but really didn't, was not interested until probably 21 years old.
When you say I didn't know what he did, but I knew what he did you know he was going and speaking in front of large
Yeah,
groups?
I knew he was a
You did.
speaker. He traveled a lot. He, very big. I mean, he is the embodiment of a true entrepreneur. And again, a renowned speaker, built an amazing training company, and so he's a busy guy on the road a lot. So I knew he spoke. I knew some things, but frankly, at that age, didn't care.
Right.
Had an idea, but like I said, until I was 21, and when I was 21, I started to.
Was there ever a time where you went and saw him speak when you were young?
No.
Not once.
I think I saw him speak for the first time when I was maybe 23.
What was that like?
It's great. It was, so when a little bit of history, obviously didn't go to college as I shared, out of high school, again lost, almost went into the military, ended up working in a machine shop, did that for 3.5 years, saved up a bunch of money, still didn't know I was an entrepreneur yet, but saved up a bunch of money. And then I took my entrepreneurial leap, lost it all, got involved in real estate. And so long story short, it led me to real estate because I was doing real estate investing. I had real estate agents running around doing me favors and buying properties, and they were making the commission. So I thought I'd make the commission. And so I decided to go get my real estate license. And when I did that, the company that my dad built was a sales training company in the real estate industry. But never in my mind, the two shall meet. And so I remember telling him, I think I'm going to go get my real estate license. And I literally, when I told him, had planned in my head I was going to say, I'm going to get my real estate license, but strictly for investments. And as I told him that, I couldn't even get the second half out when he said, well, here's what you need to do. Blah, 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 blah. So that's when I started to realize what it is that he does and the impact he had on the world. And I fought it for a little while. But I then decided to jump in head first into the real estate industry and learn everything that he taught. And when I saw the world that he had created, it just lit me up. And I set a goal for myself that I want to be the president of his company. And so that's a really long answer to your question. But that's when I saw him for the first time. And when I saw him.
Okay, so what kind of machine shop work were you doing exactly?
So funny. I was a gear hobber, and a damn good one.
Were you really?
Oh, I was good. So gears. So at least 33 years ago, the way gears were made is you cut it's a gear hobber. You literally cut the gear. Small quantity stuff. And so in my department, there were 15 machines. And, you get the order for the gear, and I would cut it. And I took great pride in the day that I had 13 machines running at the same time. So I was there, like I said, for 3.5 years, worked my way up, was making a lot of money as a young person, busting my ass, 61 hours a week. But then what I realized is this is not the life for me. I don't want to work in a machine shop. Again, it's not for me. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but
Sure.
I just knew that there was this bigger calling. But I was a gear hobber.
When you were
damn good at it.
When you were in there, were you thinking, like, why are they running it like this? And they ought to be doing that. And were you thinking that kind of thing?
No, I don't think that was happening yet, because I think at that point it was about making money. I wanted to make money, save money, and it was just about working hard and being great at something. And so that's what was on my mind then. I wasn't really looking at the bigger picture. It's amazing. I really didn't see the bigger picture of the business world, again, until my mid-20s.
When you were growing up you grew up in the Detroit area, right? In the community you were in and within your family, did you feel like you were a wealthy family? Did you feel like you were middle class, or did you feel like money was tight? What was that like?
Well, I don't know how many times I'm going to quote my dad during this interview, but again, in his talks, he shares how, half his life he's been broke and half his life he's been rich, and he says, believe me, rich is better. So I've experienced both, so we and they, my mom and dad were, broke for a lot of my life. And then around 14, 15, 16, my dad started to make money and had money and nice cars and nice houses. And so what was the question?
I was curious, growing up, did your household feel like it was, in terms of money, did it feel like it was wealthy or middle class? Or
It definitely felt middle class.
Middle class?
Yeah, definitely.
Even when you got a little bit older and your dad started getting new cars and a new house and all that?
Yeah, because that, we were still in a middle class house up until I graduated high school. When I was probably 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there, then the houses started to get bigger and nicer. But
Did you move a lot?
At that point, I wasn't. Well, my parents moved. I moved 9 times by the time I was 10. My parents have moved, I think, 23 times now. So they don't stay put too often in one place. And so the longest stint I had was 7 years from middle school to graduating high school. But yeah, I moved a lot.
Wait, you moved 9 times?
9 times by the time I was 10 years old.
All in the same community?
All around Southeast Michigan, other than 1 year in Virginia. And that was an entrepreneurial father that kept making his next move. And one of those moves, as he was building a training company, was being a national training director for Realty World at the time, and that was in Virginia.
What were you feeling every time you had to move?
I feel like I'm on the therapist's couch right now. This is interesting stuff. Scared, insecure, out of sorts. So it was tough.
Every time you moved, was it like a different school? You had to make new friends every single year?
Yeah. I remember the note the teacher reading. Students, unfortunately, Gino Wickman is leaving. And then the next note when I arrived, students, we have a new student, Gino Wickman. So yeah, I remember that well.
How long have you been in your existing home?
23 years.
Grounded. Right. I ain't moving. I've done enough of that.
Yeah.
But your parents still move around.
Oh yeah. Well, they're longer stints now. So they do about 7-year stints now. A little less frequent than the 1, 2, or 3 year stints.
That's interesting. What got you, when you were at the machine shop making this money, what got you interested in real estate? How did you even know to invest in real estate?
Well, what I did is, again, I saved up, I say a bunch of money. I saved up $9,000, and then I was going to go seek my fortunes. So I left the machine shop with my $9,000, $8,500 to be exact. And, so I was going to go become rich. And the first thing I was going to do is I was going to open a corporate travel agency. And so I went to work for a corporate travel agency as a salesperson. And about 3 months into that, I decided there's no way in hell I want to be in this industry. 2% margins. And so that wasn't it. And then I started getting involved. I did a little mail order was an idea. But then I started investing in real estate. I was buying land contracts and property and rental properties. And so I can't tell you exactly what led me there, but I think I went to one of those seminars and and thought that that's how I was going to make my fortune. And so in that, as I mentioned, I had real estate agents running around doing me favors. They were making the commission, and I thought to myself, I'm going to put that commission in my pocket. So I was going to get my license so that I could do my own deals and keep the commission for myself and kind of get a double whammy.
Did your dad encourage you to go to a seminar, or did you do that on your own?
No, but he does tell the story about me coming home with all of my binders and cassette tapes, and they were cassette tapes back then of all of my knowledge.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What was your first deal?
The first deal was, I think I bought a land contract. So I literally bought the paper. So that was the first.
How much?
Maybe 30,000, something like that.
30,000. So you had 8,500 to invest. So you had to take out a loan for the rest.
No, so I'm trying to remember how it worked with the paper buying, because what you're doing is, you're buying someone else's paper, and we're going back now just about 30 years ago. So I have to remember how those deals were done. And honest to God, I can't. But at one point, I borrowed money from my dad. And I remember it was about 20 to 30 grand. So maybe that was part of that deal. I mean, forgive me for not remembering. It moved
You're
so
forgiven.
fast. Yeah.
Did you make money?
Absolutely not. Well, no, I made money on each deal, very little, but I burned through the $8,500 in a year and a half. I was basically broke by the time I was 21 years old.
Were you ever taught how to manage money or anything like that? No.
Never. That's a whole nother conversation.
Go
But
ahead.
I'm guessing you're going to somehow try and get me there.
Well, I am curious about
Yeah.
your relationship with money. I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Well, my relationship with money is this. I've been broke 3 times, 21, 24, or 5, and 31. The big one was, and that was, again, always, taking the leap from the machine shop to go seek my fortunes and build my empire. What I learned there is there's no such thing as get rich quick. There's only get rich slow. Then I got into real estate, as I shared, did very well in real estate. Rookie of the year, sold $5 million in real estate as a 23-year-old kid. Average sale price was like $136,000. So very successful there. So all of a sudden had a lot of money, saved a lot of money. Then I left that to go take over the family business. And so that's where I set that goal for myself. I want to be president of the company. My dad said there's no way his kids are getting in the business. He didn't want him in the business. He didn't want to cross that line. But his business partner talked him into bringing me in. And so when I made that leap to go work for the company, I started at the bottom selling his products. So I went from making 150 grand a year to 25 grand a year, working on commission. And so I just burned through all of my cash in about a year. So again, I was broke there, taking this new leap. And then fortunately worked my way up very fast in his business, ultimately taking the business over in a year and a half, which we can talk more about that if you're interested. But my goal was always to be a millionaire by the time I was 30, which I achieved by 31, so I missed it by a year. I was worth $1.2 million by 31, and then flat broke by 32. Dot-com crash, terrible investments. I let it all ride on a bunch of crazy stuff, and was $200,000 in debt by 32, 33.
And you were so excited to join your father's business with his partner.
Very.
What did you think you were getting yourself into? And did you even know what role you were going to play in the business?
It's funny, I haven't thought about these things in a long time. Howard Stern is the greatest interviewer on the planet. You might be the second greatest interviewer on the planet. I thought we were going to talk about Leap and helping entrepreneurs.
We are going to talk about that.
I know. This is great.
God,
So
strike me down if I don't. I mean, the amount of, by the way, just as a side, this morning, wouldn't you know it, I got an email from Amazon announcing pre-sales for Leap,
Hey,
the book.
Hey,
Did you know that?
I did not.
Well,
I'm not involved
Your
in
peeps are taking
Cool,
care of
that's
you.
great.
I took that as a sign that we better talk about
Yeah.
this today, but not including all the numerous emails. And
Yeah. No, so we're going to go wherever you want to go, and it's just I need to pause and ponder and take myself
yeah,
back
please
there.
do.
What did I think I was getting myself into? Again, as I mentioned, I started taking his training, seeing him speak, seeing the impact that he had on these people. And so he created a sales training program that takes an average realtor and helps them generate a six-figure income. And I mean, he literally changed lives. 100,000 students went through his program. And so I just fell in love with that cause. And so what I thought I was getting myself into was just that. But then maybe that's where I started to maybe realize my calling, and that is this entrepreneurial running companies thing. But at the same time, I started at the bottom, knew I needed to start at the bottom, and then I'm also reminded of something he said to me. And so he didn't want his kids in the business, and as I mentioned, his partner was trying to get me in there because his partner, ironically, was my trainer as I was learning all of my dad's training. I would take his program. He was the trainer for the programs that I went to. So as he's trying to get him in there, and I'm telling my dad I want to be the president of your company someday, as he started to cave, he said, go be successful somewhere else. And in this case, I was in real estate. And he said, go sell $5 million in real estate and then come and talk to me. Because that was a really big number back then, almost 30 years ago. So I did exactly that. I just went and sold $5 million in real estate because I want to. So having lived all of that training and been in that world, I knew exactly what I was getting myself into, and that was being a part of this thing that was making a huge impact. Mm-hmm. Did I think I was getting involved in a company that was in dire need of a turnaround and that I would be running it in a year and 4 months? I didn't quite think that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I truly had the fastest corporate climb in the history of business.
So when they brought you in, they said, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to learn all aspects of the company.
It wasn't as much that. It was, I said I want to be a part of it, and they threw me into product sales and just kind of starting at the bottom. And I say work my way up. Who knows if that would have happened? And so I was literally going door to door selling his products. Yeah. And so I don't know if you want to hear the quick chain of events, but then yes, I did absolutely start to get involved in every aspect of the business. Not so much by design, but I kept seeing opportunities and problems to solve. And fortunately, there were 3 owners of the business, third, and a third, my dad and his 2 partners, and they just all, when I would say, hey, this is a problem, they would kind of sick me on it, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Who was the partner? What's the partner's name that wanted you to come in?
Ed Escobar.
Ed. So when you were first explaining that Ed was sort of trying to convince your dad to bring you in, what I was thinking was, this dude can sell. We ought to bring him in and get him selling for us. Was that an initial thought process? Because you did say they put you right into product sales.
No, I think that I don't think it was that well thought out. I think it was just that was the easiest place to throw me. That would be the less expensive, and probably just see if I could, fend for myself. It's not like I was going to come into the finance department or come into, so that was just the most logical thing. And then yes, obviously I was a pretty damn good salesperson with my track record coming in. So, but to get into their psyche and exactly why, I don't know. I was just this hungry. So I got involved at 24 years old. I was this hungry 24-year-old that they just needed a point, and I was going to go there, and I just wanted to be involved. And I'm not so sure it was that strategic.
I'm drawing on a little bit of my own experiences. How large was the company at the time?
So revenue-wise, it was doing about $5 million. It had a team of 50 trainers all over North America and a support team of 15 to 20 people.
So, I'm thinking, as you found out later, the financial stability of the company wasn't really there, yet they brought you in without it sounds like much of a plan. Were they just not thinking that out in terms of the budget?
Again, so I can't explain their psyche. I can't get inside their heads. But, what they were at the time were these incredible entrepreneurs, built this amazing empire. My dad created this amazing training program that revolutionized the industry and how real estate agents were sales trained. And so they had that ability in every aspect of what an entrepreneur is. And again, the company was in dire need of a turnaround and financially in trouble. So I don't think they even thought about how do we economically make this work. I think they just, Ed saw an opportunity and threw me in there, which economically, was probably another bad financial decision, and they had made a lot of them back then because that was not their strength. The economics of the business was not their strength. Growing it was their strength. Mm-hmm. So I don't think, there was a lot of thought around how are we going to afford this. Mm-hmm. It was just, let's throw this kid at this thing. Mm-hmm. But I think they also fully expected they were going to get a return on the investment in me and increased product sales.
For sure.
Yeah. So I can't remember a detailed strategic conversation. It's not like there was this methodical career path they laid out for me. I mean, it was scrappy, entrepreneurial, figuring it out every step of the way. Mm-hmm.
When did you realize that the company was in dire need of a turnaround and that there was some financial issues?
Yeah, so the real fast story is started in product sales, worked my way up to kind of heading up product sales and getting involved in cataloging and marketing, and then working my way up to what we called client relations. And that's when I was starting to get involved with working with clients and the trainers and orchestrating that. And then I worked my way up to what they called the executive committee. And so it was when I got in the executive committee and I started seeing the financials and really seeing every aspect of the business. That was when I saw it. So the company was unfortunately imploding financially. They got a little cocky in terms of they had this incredible run in the 80s. Early 90s, the recession hit. And so that was a real downturn for the real estate industry, and so they took a hit there, but they really couldn't do any wrong for a good 10-year run, and I think, they got a little bit cocky with that, and so they started to frustrate some clients, competition started coming in, and so it was just this triple whammy, and so the business started to turn. When I took it over, it was insolvent. The attorney and the accountant said you're insolvent. It was about almost $1 million in really ugly short-term debt, like due in 3 months, which wasn't there to pay. And so that's my first realization was on the executive committee when I saw the financials. And as the story goes, it was, probably 3 to 6 months after that I really felt I could save it. It was in dire straits, and as the story goes, my dad handed me a check for $100,000 and gave me the keys to the business and said, if you can save it, go save it. And I talked to a lot of vendors and creditors and worked out all that debt over about a 3-year period, and just got to work on winning back clients and getting on the road and meeting with clients. And so anyway, it's long answer to your question.
Well, I mean, it sounds really wise coming from a 52-year-old who's had 100 and,
51 years
50,
old.
Sorry. We graduated in 85 from high school.
Yeah.
That's how I did my math. Isn't that 52?
I graduated at 17 years
old.
old.
Okay. 51. What was I saying? Oh, it sounds really wise now. But I'm thinking about at least where I was at 25. I mean, how did you have that? Were you wise beyond your years? And how did you even know how to read a financial statement?
It had to be. I still can't read a financial statement, but I could do simple math. So, I think I maybe was wise beyond my years. I was hungry. I worked like no one else. But then I also had great mentors. I mean, my dad, I consider my greatest mentor, and what he taught me everything about communicating, leading, managing people. And then I had Sam Cupp, my business mentor, that taught me everything about business. And so I was armed with these two incredible mentors. I was a nut about learning. Well, I didn't go to college and I was never going back to academia. I've always been a fanatic about learning. I mean, I can't tell you how many books I read in my 20s, how many audios I listened to, how many seminars I went. So I'm a fanatic about learning, but learning my way. So all of that, I don't know. I just had this ability to see it, understand how to solve it, and borderline kill myself solving it. I mean, I was saving the family business.
Did you look at it that way at the time?
100%.
Were you stressed out?
Ask my wife.
Were you losing hair?
Yes. I had a full head of hair going into that deal.
I want to see a picture of you with hair.
Oh, I've got...
Because you look really good without hair, actually.
Well, thanks. A lot of hair in high school.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Did you look better with hair
It's
or
ironic.
without hair? What do you think?
You'd have to ask my wife.
I will, but she's not here. What do you think?
I'm guessing I looked better with hair.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I don't know.
Okay. So how did it come about that you ended up getting it turned around enough to sell it? And were the partners excited to sell it?
So it took 3 years to completely turn it around, get out of all that debt, get the company growing again, profitable again. So it's about 3 years. Then the truth of the matter is I started to get a little bit bored. So going into year 4, I was ready to move on and go do the next thing. And I went to my partners and said, I'm going to move on. And they talked me into staying. And so I stayed for another 2 or 3 years and then realized I have to move on. I realized that there was something bigger for me. And I wasn't taking no for an answer the next time. And so I sat down with them. And so I had replaced the third partner, going way back to when I took over.
So you became a partner.
Yeah, I became a partner very early on. I was I owned 30%, Ed owned, and then my dad and Ed. But we were basically 1/3 partners. I owned a little less than a third. So I had replaced the prior partner. And so the partners I went to were my dad and Ed. And wasn't going to take no for an answer this time, and I needed to move on. And so they agreed, and we actually worked out a package on how they were going to buy my stock and how I was going to move on. And we got approached. So quite frankly, we got lucky. And it was just the perfect scenario for everybody. It enabled me to move on. Got my dad a really nice check. And, got Ed what he wanted, and we all agreed it was time, and went through 9 months of the process and successfully sold the business and moved on.
Is the training program still around?
It is still around, yeah.
Under the Floyd Wickman
I'm not sure what they call it. So the program was called the Sweat Hogs program, and I really don't know the current state, but I believe that it's still around.
Okay.
It's not the company that it once was, but I'm pretty sure it's still called the Sweat Hogs
When I
program.
was doing a little background, I came upon a video of your dad doing a training or something, a talk, and there were people there for a training.
Yeah.
And so I wondered, is he back in the business or?
No, so one little other data point for what it's worth, but we sold. I then had a 3-year contract, so I was committed to 3 years to staying on and running the company after the sale, which I did not want to do, but I agreed to do it, and it was the only way to do it. But I managed to get out of a 3-year contract a year and a half early, so I got out in about a year and a half, I would say. So that was the last little piece of my story, and then after that is when I set off to pursue the next thing. My dad retired, for lack of a better term, still spoke and things like that, but he got the calling to continue to do his passion, and so he actually created another training program, and so that's what he's been doing for the last, trying to do fast math here, 15 years, I would say.
Yeah, he's still working.
So it's in his in his blood.
Yeah, interesting.
There's no stopping him in his mid to late 70s, and he's still as good as ever on that stage, and quite a guy.
Yeah, he is. I've met him a couple of times, and you can feel the energy. He's a great guy.
Yeah, thanks.
When you left, did you know what you were going to do?
I had no idea. So what I did is, once I got out of my contract early, I decided that the first thing was to take a year off. So I was going to take a 1-year sabbatical. Ended up being a 9-month sabbatical. So I took 9 months off. And first of all, got back in shape. So I was just beat to shit, out of shape. I mean, that, like I said earlier, borderline killed me. So I got back into shape. Read like a madman. I would literally go to Starbucks almost every day, sit and read and think as part of my process. Worked out like a madman. Got in incredible shape. And then started soul searching, and a gentleman who I call my guardian angel, Mike Palin, who worked with us in the family business, continues to work with my dad. He has come into my life 3 times and put something in front of me that literally altered the course of my life. One was getting me to speak on business in the real estate industry way back when, in my mid-20s. The second was during that 9-month sabbatical, he hands me a book called The Monk in the Riddle, and it's a story about a guy, Randy Commissar wrote the book, and it's a story about a guy that helps CEOs, helps entrepreneurs, works with entrepreneurs, and in the book, the client gives Randy, for lack of a better term, a business card that said virtual CEO on it. So Randy Commissar was kind of this virtual CEO. And so I read this book on this sabbatical. I'm now in shape. I'm now fully energized. I'm now ready to get back at it. And I said, whoa, I'm going to be a virtual CEO. Instantly formed my corporation called Virtual CEO.
Wow.
And set out that this is why I'm on the face of the earth, is to help entrepreneurs build amazing companies. Mm-hmm. And that was all because Mike Palin handed me that book.
That's nuts, because when you said virtual CEO, I had forgotten that was the name of your company way back when.
Right, and it's nothing that the world ever sees, because it's my holding company is what it is. So that's just my little
But wasn't it
secret.
Called that when I met you?
That's where you cut the checks. That's who you cut the checks to whenever you would pay me for a session.
Oh, okay.
So that's the only reason you saw that?
Yeah.
It was the business accelerator, way back in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But maybe, my card probably said virtual CEO for a year, but that went behind the scenes because I just wanted that to be the holding company. Mm-hmm. That was not the right name for the product that I ultimately created.
Okay, so when you decided you were going to be this virtual CEO and have this type of company, what did you design, and then how did you start getting your clients?
So, I had no idea, but what I knew is I knew that entrepreneurs needed help, and I really believed I could help them. And it stemmed from, I got involved in an organization called Young Entrepreneurs, which we were both in together, you and I, that now is called Entrepreneurs Organization. I was one of the original 10 members in the Detroit chapter, and they put you in forum groups of about 10 to 12 people you meet every month. And so here I was meeting with these 10 to 12 entrepreneurs every month. And about 2 or 3 years in, as I'm running the family business, doing this turnaround, we're all sharing our woes and solving our problems, I had this light bulb moment, and I said, wow, these guys are as fucked up as I am. And I thought, opportunity. And so it was that clarity. It was, I'm a student of the Strategic Coach program, Dan Sullivan's program. 23 years I've been in the program now. And he teaches you how to discover your unique ability. And so going through some exercises about what is my unique ability, that also created some clarity. And that's what also led me to leaving the family business, is I realized that of the 100% of my working time, I was spending 5% in unique ability and 95% at doing everything else. And so I built a business around that 5%. And so that was another clarity moment. And so then I decided and presented to my EO forum that here's the idea I want to go take to the world. And then I worked together with one of my fellow EO members, and we were teaching Vern Harnish's stuff and Jim Collins' stuff and Lencioni's stuff. And so we were just trying to figure it out. And all the while, I had a vision for what I wanted to create, and I kept calling it, I want to be a virtual CEO, I want to be a virtual CEO. And then we parted ways after about a year and a half because we just didn't see eye to eye on what to build. And over about a 5-year period and 500 sessions with clients, it came clear the need for an operating system the solution that ultimately became EOS. And so I give you that long answer because it's not like it was this perfect answer. It never is. It's such a fallacy. It is hours and hours and days and years of working and obsession, and it comes clear. It's just very iterative. I just knew at the very beginning that entrepreneurs needed help, and I really believed I could help them, and I had this knack and this ability, and shoot forward 5 years, and that ability turned into what is now EOS.
When you started this virtual CEO and you were in EO and you were starting to recognize and then maybe even getting some clients to consult with, I guess, because you didn't really have a system per se.
Yeah.
At any time, did you feel conscious that you had not gone to college and maybe feeling like all these people were like MBAs or something, even though they weren't?
Extremely self-conscious because you get the look from some percentage of people when you tell them you didn't go to college. So of course, I know the look, and I know the look really well. So yeah, how do you not get self-conscious when somebody, all of a sudden.
What do they say? Like, so where'd you go to school? Is
wish,
it like that kind of thing?
Of course. So, but I couldn't even show you the look, but I know the look well. And and the good news is, 3 decades in, it's more acceptable. And certainly with having a little bit of a track record of success, now people, now it's kind of a compliment that says, well, you built that and didn't go to college. So I'm totally at peace with it now. But back then, because that question gets asked constantly. So yes is the short answer.
Did you feel it cost you, long term, obviously it's been great, but at the time, were there ever moments where you felt like it cost you a client or a sale?
There's nothing I can tie directly to, but I'm sure, it helps me define my target market. And so my kind of people, they just don't care about that.
Yeah.
But the ones that do care about that, I repel them. And so yes would be the answer. I just couldn't tell you, here's an example of somebody that found out I didn't go to college and didn't move forward with me.
What percentage of the time at the outset, maybe it's the first 1 to 3 years or something where you were doing this, were you in a sense faking it? And what I mean by that is not that you were doing that on purpose, but you were getting questions or there were things that weren't connecting. And so you were just like on the fly, kind of coming up with stuff.
You're talking about in creating the process?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So again, just to give you a little more detail on that journey. So I threw myself out there, and the joke I always say is, I threw myself out there knowing there was a need with no resume. I certainly ran the family business, but the only reference I had was my dad, so that's not going to get you very far. So I just have very good friends, one of which was on the EO forum that referred me. And so ironically, my very first client came from sitting in a strategic coach class who was sitting next to what was my very first client. And my friend says, you really need Gino, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I just, again, knew I could help. And at the time, those partners we started with, we created this funky little workbook to start things off. And I did my first session with them, and we just kind of made it up, again, with this amalgamation of Vern Harnish's stuff and Jim Collins' stuff and Lencioni's stuff. And then it just kind of evolved from there. So absolutely threw myself in the room and just kind of figured it out. And then if you play that out over 5 years, what I kept doing is just listening for what their problems were. And what I did is I call it pulling levers. And so I would listen to all of their problems. Again, this was 500 sessions over 5 years. And one of my unique abilities is that I'm able to see patterns and trends. And so there's a tool called Kolbe, a profiling tool. And Kathy Kolbe is the creator, and we have the exact same profile. And what she talks about is that Kolbe profile is one that sees patterns and trends. And so I just had this ability, after seeing a lot of data points, I just really clearly see patterns and trends. And so 5 years of that, listening to all those problems and then trying to remedy each one of those problems with tools from books I've read, that I would create, whatever it was, I would pull levers. And the problem that they had, I would offer a solution, and I call it pulling levers because in its most primal sense, when I pulled the lever and they went like this, it worked and it was good. And if they went like this, it didn't work and it was bad. And so picture pulling the lever 10,000 times over 5 years and 500 sessions. And the ones that got the result that I call the smile, it just kind of evolved into realizing these are the handful of tools that are going to make the biggest impact. That led me to creating what is now the EOS model, helped me to realize the 6 key components of a business, and really helped them implement an operating system where they weren't calling it an operating system back then. And so I saw this great opportunity that basically took all of those data points and all of those problems and solved them for an entrepreneur, a 10 to 250 person privately held company, faster than anything else on the planet. Mm-hmm. So that's
the lever, just for those listening, the lever you pulled when it was the right solution, you just smiled. That meant the lever.
No. The lever is, so you're telling me your woes and your problems as a client.
Right.
And my inclination is to solve your pain. Okay, that's what I am drawn to do. I'm going to solve your pain. And so if you're complaining to me about people or sales or whatever the issue is, I want to solve that for you. And so if you're complaining about your people, I want to give you a solution. And when I give you a solution that doesn't work, that's where the lever didn't work, and that's the frowny face.
Right.
But when I give you a solution that worked and pull that lever and you smile, that means it worked, then I know I've got something. And so and sometimes I didn't know the lever worked for months, because then you're coming back to me going, holy cow, that thing you taught me worked. And then I would do that 100 more times and make sure I got the same smile 100 times. And then that's how I knew, that's one of the tools. Because there's only 20 tools in the EOS toolbox, and there will only ever be 20 tools in the EOS toolbox. And those are the 20 things that are going to solve 80% of your problems and strengthen the 6 key components of your business. So am I making any sense with
you sound
the process?
Like you know what you're talking about. Makes a little sense.
So I call that pulling levers.
I get you.
And watching patterns and trends, just figuring out how to solve your pain as fast as possible.
Did you have in your head, I want to create this system? Or as you were helping these entrepreneurial companies, did you start to recognize these patterns?
Yeah, it's the patterns and trends. So,
and what was the point where you said, there's like a process here, actually. There's these key components. Like where was that moment?
Yeah. Well, I wish there were one moment. So there were 2 iterations of the EOS model. And so it was previously, I called it the Business Accelerator. And the Business Accelerator model was this clunky, archaic looking thing, which you probably remember because that's when we engaged. So it started with this more linear approach of you have issues. Well, it started with you have a vision. So we got to clarify your vision. And then we've got to help you get traction toward that vision. And when we do that, we're going to smoke out a bunch of issues. And then, so the point in that is each one of those things in that clunky model, there were 6 of them, I realized were more components of a holistic operating system. And so the whole idea, the aha moment, wherever it hit, and I wish I could tell you, was taking a holistic approach to healing a company. And so there's the best answer I can give you.
So once you started to create the process and bring that to market, so to speak, that was kind of your selling proposition. Go ahead.
Well, so you're, how do I want to say this? So when it evolved from the Business Accelerator and these 6 clunky things into this holistic approach of healing the company, and it turned into this model with 6 key components, which again are the root of all evils for a business. It's not like I had this epiphany and went out and started selling it. I then showed that to every client 50 times and said, poke holes in this. Tell me what's wrong with what I just told you. And pulling levers, when I would illustrate that, they'd all go, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So, it's not like Nothing I do is theory. I abhor theory. So everything I do is from the real world. It's been tried and tested 100 times, if not 1,000 times, before I'm comfortable sharing it with the world. So it's not this moment where I went into a room and came out and said, aha. It was, again, 1,000 data points and pulling levers. And when every client and every person saw that model and went, wow, that makes so much sense, that's it, then I felt confident. And this is, we're talking literally 5 years in, 500 sessions in, that's when I really felt like I had something and decided to put it in a book called Traction and teach the world this little secret that I had in Southeast Michigan with, at the time, were, maybe 50 companies that I had been practicing on, you being one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that's when we decided to
So I wondered if there was a time where, because you develop kind of, I'm actually going to get out of the sessions for a second, and I want to think about, I was thinking about how you got clients, because I feel like you actually developed a process for that too.
Oh, for sure.
And that's what many of your, we'll get more into how large this thing became, but when you were on a quote unquote sales call, you were in front of a potential client, you had your process that you went through with them. Was there a moment where you were walking in, you're like, I know exactly what I'm doing here, I'm clear as day, and this thing sells. I got something here.
Right. So, on that, absolutely, there is a scientific sales process behind it that I created. And where it comes from is all of my dad's training and all of his sales training and the psychology and the master that he is. And so I just took what I learned from him in terms of the science of selling and the art of selling and built a process, again, pulling the lever a bunch of times, but dialing in how to meet with that potential client for the very first time, and then how to take them through a space training program, which was the genius of what my dad created with that sales training program back in the real estate industry. So applying space learning and space training, and then he always taught this thing called time and objective. You've only got this much time, and so what is your objective? And so really honing, mastering, and deciding, I've got this client for 8 hours. What is the most impact I can teach them in this day I'm going to spend with them that's going to get them the maximum results? And then the next session, same question. The next session, same question. So it's a question of how do we get those 20 tools embedded in their organization at the end of this journey? And that is what is known as the EOS process, and how we take a client from persuading them to join us, and 50% after that first meeting go forward and 50% don't. A little higher percentage than that, but and so that's the answer.
That's a high conversion rate.
It's a very high conversion rate. And our best EOS implementers, they're 60, 70, 75%.
When did you know you'd write a book at some point?
I think I knew I was going to write a book when I was 22 years old, 23 years old. So reading Think and Grow Rich, in that story in Napoleon Hill, and him interviewing millionaires in the early 1900s, I said, I want to do something like that someday.
And so you went through this process in writing it, and you'd go down like in your basement and write it, if I remember correctly.
Not the basement. Starbucks.
Starbucks, you were writing it? What's the basement? I always get this picture of the cave. Is there the cave or something?
The basement? I'm not sure what that is.
No, okay. It must be something else. Unrelated to you, probably. Okay. So you wrote the book. Could you have imagined when you were writing that book and it came out that it would have sold as many copies as it has?
Yes.
That's great.
So
you could have imagined
it. The insecure side prayed to all that is holy that I would sell one copy. Worst case, Kathy, my wife, promised she'd buy one copy, so I knew I had one copy sold. But absolutely, yes. I have very high hopes. I continue to have very high hopes for that book, which has now sold 600,000 copies. I would love for it to sell 1 million copies, so my fingers are crossed on that. But I hope it continues. Fortunately, sales have gone up on average 30% every year for 12 years since I wrote it. So hoping that trend continues. But the secure side of me has very high hopes. The insecure side of me...
In any way, did you manifest the sales for that book, the vision for that book?
Hell yeah.
How'd you do
I'm trying
that?
to get inside your spiritual head and figure out the root of your question so I can answer it.
Well, how'd you
the
go
Rob
about
Dubé
doing
way.
that?
And so in the new book, I teach this discipline, but you simply see it every night.
Mm-hmm.
You see it every night before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm. And
I saw it every night.
Yeah, and what's the process you go through to see it?
15 straight years.
So as somebody, a young entrepreneur who may be thinking, am I an entrepreneur? Am I not an entrepreneur? Am I going to take this leap? You know, part of this process of manifesting is exactly what were you doing when you say, I just would see it every night. Would you sit down in a chair and vision it, or would you just be walking around and whenever you felt like it, you'd vision it, or what was it?
So it's funny you're bringing that up. So I share 8 things an entrepreneur in the making can do when they take their entrepreneurial leap to increase their odds of success. And that's number 8. And I wrestled for months whether I was going to include that in the book because it's so intangible and it's a little woo-woo, and but it's a really simple process, and it lasts a minute every night, and it's when my head hits the pillow. I first say thank you, and then I see clearly what the hell it is that I want.
Do you have to do it before you go to bed?
Yeah, for me, that's the case.
Okay.
There's 1,000 formulas. All I can speak to is mine. And you know, I come from the reading and the learning I did in my 20s is Napoleon Hill and Earl Nightingale, just the classics, the masters, the original motivators. And so Earl Nightingale had a recording that he calls The Strangest Secret, which, you know, has been replicated many times since, but at the same time, you can take it all the way back to the biblical times. So it's a timeless principle of seeing what you want. And so the strangest secret is that we become what we think about. And so that's where that discipline comes from. And so I see it every night. It takes a minute. You can see it in the morning. You can see it during the day. But it's been 30 to 60 seconds for me every night. And it can only be one thing, in my opinion.
What is it now?
To impact 1 million entrepreneurs in the making.
What does it look like?
1 million entrepreneurs in the making have been impacted.
So
that means that 1 million entrepreneurs have taken their leap, and their journey was 50% less bumpy, and the success rate is substantially higher than what the statistics have been for the last 30 years.
Why does it cause you so much angst to see potential entrepreneurs go through this process and fail?
I wish I could tell you. I honestly don't know, and so it could come from saving the family business. It could come from God knows what. But I try to end pain and suffering in my expertise. I can't help anyone else on the planet other than entrepreneurs. So don't ask me for any help. I'm incapable. So when I see, going back to that EO forum, and realizing, hey, they're as fucked up as I am. The pain that I went through, the feeling lost at 17, 18, 19, not knowing what I was. So that's all pain and suffering to me. And I feel I can help, and so I feel like I can make it a little less painful. And so I'm just compelled and drawn to do it.
Who do you feel are the modern versions of Napoleon Hill and Earl Nightingale?
Oh. I'd have to sit here and think for 30 minutes, but I'm not sure that there is one. So again, I recommend every reader, you've got to read Think and Grow Rich. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like that masterpiece that was written in like 1920. So to me, and again, that just might be my 51-year-old old biased self, but I've not seen it, and that might not be fair to whatever is out there. And I'm still an avid reader, but I don't. It's timeless. It is, it's when I wrote Traction, again, knock on wood, but I really wrote it to be timeless. I mean, I really believe that operating system and those tools are going to be around 50 and 100 years from now because it's basic human principles. EOS is a system for managing human energy. It is on a primal level that is never going to change, in my humble opinion. So, what was the question?
Who are the modern versions?
So I hope that 50 years from now, somebody says, "What's the modern version of EOS?" That they say the same thing for EOS, and I don't say that, and I hope that doesn't come across as arrogant. But there's nothing like Think and Grow Rich to me, and I know that the 17, 22, 25-year-olds that read it now are as blown away as I was. So it's just so basic and primal. So I don't think there's a modern version. Read the original, go to the source material. So that's a long...
Well, everyone draws their inspiration from different places.
Correct.
And, I had an opportunity to watch, or I should say listen to the audio from Earl Nightingale, which I had never listened to before. So it was great. I thought, I'll just listen for a few minutes. I'll get it. But I was really drawn into it. It was fantastic. But having younger kids myself, I have a 24 going on 25-year-old, and I have a 20-year-old. They don't grasp onto some of the older material. They have their own things that they grasp onto. So that's what prompted the question for me, because you said this idea is woo-woo. And I really wonder if it is.
It's not, but...
Why do you think it is? Why do you say... you say that a lot. So, not a lot, but you say it.
100 million people and ask them if they think it's woo-woo, and a large percentage is going to say, that's woo-woo shit.
Yeah, man. Like mind training?
No, it's because it's so intangible, and it's...
Yeah.
Some people, if they can't touch it and feel it, they don't believe it.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
What do your kids think about it? Your kids are similar in age, 27.
Yeah. So mine are 23 and 26 now.
Yeah.
Great kids. So 23-year-old son Gino and 26-year-old daughter Alexis. I would say, I think they both believe it. I'm not a very preachy dad, and my parenting style is to lead by example, so they're not hearing a new life lesson from me every day of their life. But I think if you asked them, they'd probably say they believe it. My son is a mechanical engineer. I think he's a little more skeptical because you can't touch and feel it. But I don't know that that's fair. But I would say, in a nutshell, yes.
Have you ever shared the book with them or the audio recording?
Which one are we talking about?
Napoleon Hill or Earl Nightingale?
Yes. Strangest Secret.
You've shared that with them?
Very much so, yes. And I think they both listened to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And? How old were they?
You'd have to ask. How old were they?
Yeah.
I think they were in their late teens, early 20s.
Okay. Got it. At what point did you think to yourself, okay, look, this business accelerator program I have, it can't go, I can only do so much with it. I have limited amounts of time, but I want to get it out there more. I forget the number, 10,000 companies.
Was the goal, you're saying?
Yeah. At some point you were like, I want to get this. So
the goal when I had 50 clients was to have 10,000 clients.
Right. But you couldn't have 10,000
clients. That was in
clients.
the early 2000s.
Right, but you couldn't have 10. So you had to think, okay, now how do I, Yeah. And so, talk a little bit about that part of the journey.
Yeah. So, 5 years in, I've got this wonderful little secret, extremely lucrative. So I had this great gig, and I was then met with a crossroad. That is, do I keep this little secret to myself, or do I share it with the world? And obviously I decided to share it with the world. And when you share something like that with the world, the scary part is two things. You open yourself up for critics and thieves, and so that was very scary. But what I learned from Dan Sullivan is that, the best way to protect all of that is to put it out there in the world. And so that gave me some confidence. And so anyway, so I obviously decided to leverage it. And so I did two things. I put it in a book, and then I found the perfect partner to help me replicate myself. And so the goal was to take this thing I created, I was an EOS implementer, and give this opportunity to as many people that want it. And so this was the third point that Mike Palin came into my life and made an impact on my life, because I wrote a list that I called That Person. That what we teach is, it's called an integrator. A visionary needs an integrator to build and grow a company. And this is where Mike Palin came into my life and introduced me to the perfect integrator partner for me, which is Don Tinney. And so Don Tinney and I joined forces, I'm just doing quick math, but 15 years ago, 14, 13 years, somewhere in there. And he and I joined forces, and we built a team of EOS implementers, now over 300 strong. We've reached, and we're helping over 60,000 companies. We've taken almost 7,000 companies through the process. And so that was all Don and I joining forces. I couldn't have done it without him. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, so the vision was 10,000, and it's been 60,000.
No, so it's 10,000 companies taken through the process with an EOS implementer.
I see.
Which were right around 7,000. And the goal, when I set that in the early 2000s, it was to achieve that by 2020, which I thought about every night for 15 years. And so, knock on wood, we will hit that 10,000 in 2020. Mm-hmm. And that 10,000 translates into 100,000 companies that are actually using the EOS tools, but 10,000 that we've taken through the process.
Does that ever overwhelm you in terms of pride, even though you're very humble? So I get that. But do you ever just sit back and go, this process has affected 100?
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So for sure, I mean, it's. I have my moments where, I'm proud of what's been created. Mm-hmm. That lasts about 4 seconds, and then I focus on what needs to be created.
There was a point, though, where you weren't sure if it was really going to click, you and Don. You weren't feeling good about it. What happened, and then
So it just wasn't working. The first year and a half, we were a year and a half in, it just wasn't working. We weren't generating revenue. We were trying to find EOS implementers. We couldn't find the right ones. We did find this one great one, Mike Payton. And so what we kept saying in those days is, worst case, Don, Payton, and I are just going to, do this thing. So it just wasn't working. And so I sitting in a Starbucks, pouring over the dots, as I call it, just kind of had my clarity moment about how we needed to change the model. And we just changed it to a complete open source, abundance-based model, changed the licensing arrangement with the implementers, and it took off from there. So it was a rough first year and a half. Don and I were killing ourselves.
And unreal, sometimes as an entrepreneur, you come against this moment and you think, I don't know here. And then you persevere through it. And then, and I was just at this conference. It was my first time, the EOS conference. And there were 1,000 people there. And I was like, what in the world? Incredible. There's a conference for this with 1,000 people? And it was like the third year they'd done it or something. So it had grown from basically nothing to 1,000 people. So unreal. And you, by the way, didn't run that. That had nothing to do with you, which is even more remarkable.
Open source, abundance-based. Yeah. So 3 of our implementers created that event, the EOS conference, and it is an incredible experience.
And there's a set of books that the implementers have written along with you. Right?
So I've written 5 EOS books.
Yeah.
Traction I wrote myself. The next 4 are co-written with EOS implementers, because with my mad scientist, introverted, want to be in the lab, the master plan there is that those co-author implementers are the promoters of the book. That's why I've done 2 podcasts in the last 20 years, and now I'm doing my 3rd one with you, because I don't want to, being the promoter and the rah-rah guy is not my thing. So that's the master plan. But yes, there are 5 EOS books in the traction library, as we call it, and 4 are written co-written with implementers. And you said something there that prompted something, because when you talk about that tough period that Don and I went through in that first year and a half, there was also a tough period I went through in the first 5 years of creating it when I was on my own, because remember, that's when I lost all of my money. So when I took this leap to go become a virtual CEO and help companies, I had that 1.2 million, and I had this great safety net. And then as I literally started taking the leap, that's when everything started going like this. And so I was a year and a half in to trying to create this thing and working with clients. All the money was gone, 200,000 in debt, no more safety net. And it was rock bottom. And, I remember like it's yesterday, sitting in the kitchen with my wife, who is the most incredible, supportive person. We've been together since we were 16, 17 years old. How she puts up with me, I have no idea, but it was, I felt so bad, and also said, you know what, if I can't make this work by June 30th, so I needed to be making 15 grand a month by June 30th, or I had to go get a real job, which I'm totally unemployable, so that was terrifying. And so it worked, so that was, it was an ugly, dark period.
Unreal. Did Don and you know that there would be at some point the potential to sell this? Was that part of your vision?
I don't think that ever entered our minds. That was never the plan, never the intention. And because what's interesting is he and I had completed our succession plans. So I am very methodical and a planner and thinking ahead. And so, my succession plan started 5 years before my successor took over. And Don's succession plan started 5 years before his successor took over. So when we had completed our succession plan, so as the visionary, I replaced myself. And so Mike Payton took over as visionary in my role. Kelly Knight took over Don's role as integrator. So then all of a sudden, there's a self-sufficient leadership team in place. The plan was, we're not involved in the day-to-day. We own most of the company. And so no intention. But then I started thinking, and I realized the burden and the load that was still on me, because I owned a majority of the company. At the end of the day, it's all on me. And I realized that my energy was not at its peak. And I also, when I was 40 years old, said when I turn 50, I'm going to put my energy into focusing on entrepreneurs in the making. I want to go to the front end of the entrepreneurial journey and help those people. And what I realized is owning the majority of that company, I was not going to be able to do that to its fullest, because no matter how you slice it, when you own the majority and you go to bed, you have the 12 issues of the business on your mind. So, but the beauty was an amazing leadership team we have in place. They run the company well, but it was time. And Don and I 20 years, I think that's plenty. 20 years of doing anything is like plenty, So we sold it unconventionally. We were open and honest. We shared with our community the day that I decided to sell. We were open about that. We did what all the professionals told us not to do. And, so we sold. 30 of our implementers are owners, and so they got to buy, and we feel we found the right buyers. Great private equity firm, Firefly. Don and I still have ownership, but the intention was not to sell. It was not on our minds, but the timing was just right for a whole heck of a lot of reasons. And so Don is happier and lighter. I'm happier and lighter, and a lot of other people have great opportunities. Mm-hmm. So I'm still an EOS guy. I still have my EOS clients. I still do EOS talks. I still own 12.5% of the company. I still own the books, but it is no longer my responsibility. And now the goal is to get to 100,000 by 2030 that they set. And they don't screw it up, they'll do it.
Well, and you're their funnel potentially for the next.
We'll see. Yeah,
right?
That's not my master plan, but for sure.
Yeah.
If I create 1 million entrepreneurs that have 10 employees or more, those are certainly
That's right. So Leap, you talked about this, inspiration that you have, and by the time you were 50 and here you are, you're doing it. You sold the company and now you have some time, a little bit more time to focus on this.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things, I kind of got a sneak peek at it, which I appreciate. I loved it. It was great. I wanted to give it to my kids right away, of course, but I didn't. I held back. But there's an assessment in there actually that the potential entrepreneur can take to see if they're made for it. So what are they going to uncover in this?
So just to zoom out a little bit and give you a little bit of context, so this all stems from a passion, and it is a passion project. And like I said, at 40 is when it hit me that I'm going to create this thing, but I was going to wait till I was 50. So I literally did nothing for 10 years, and I just kept putting a bunch of stuff in a file. So there's a saying by Daniel Kennedy that says, we teach what we needed the most. Okay. And so when I look at EOS and what I created there, I created that and I taught that because that's what I needed most in my mid-20s when I was saving a family business. This project called Leap stems from, again, that 16 to 22-year-old kid that I was that was just lost and confused, and I was this thing that I didn't know what it was. It was indescribable. And so we teach what we needed the most. And so Leap is all about helping any entrepreneur in the making. You could be 16 to 60 years old. The age is irrelevant, but there are 6 essential traits that every entrepreneur has. I'm convinced of it. I've honed it, refined it, tested it, pulled a lot of levers, going back to our conversation. So there's 6 essential traits. And so anyone that has these 6 essential traits is an entrepreneur in the making, and they might be 35 years old, sitting in the corporate world. They unfortunately, followed the normal path they're told to follow, and they're miserable in this corporate world. And they have these traits, and there's nothing worse than being stuck, at a desk job in the corporate world if you have these 6 essential traits. So what the assessment does to come all the way around it, it's a quick assessment. Your audience can go to e-leap.com and take this assessment. It's there, it's free. And it just helps you know if you truly possess these 6 essential traits. And then as you can imagine, so this all starts with a book. And so the book comes out on October 15th. And there are 3 parts to the Leap content. It's called Confirm, Glimpse, Path. And what you're asking about is this confirm step that is intended to confirm whether they are or they aren't, which includes that assessment that you're asking about. But it starts there because right now, being an entrepreneur is really hot, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, like in the 70s and 80s when everybody wanted to be a rock star. Okay, so now everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And with all due love and respect, everybody is not an entrepreneur. And so, I'm going to break some hearts, and I take no joy or pleasure in that. But what I really believe I'm doing by helping somebody know that they don't have these 6 essential traits is I'm helping them realize, because it is really hard to start and build a business. And the people that don't have those traits, they're going to be miserable. So I feel I'm doing them a service. It just doesn't sometimes feel that way, obviously. And then I just go into great detail on those traits in this confirm step. I touch on 2nd and 3rd generation entrepreneurs, because if your son or daughter is going to take over your business and continue to grow it or transform it, they have to have the 6 essential traits. And so if they don't, so this will just help you determine if your son or daughter has those traits, help you determine as the son or daughter if you have those traits. And if you don't, it's okay. Be head of sales, be head of marketing, be head of ops. And then the statistics, I can't recite them perfectly, but it's like 32% of 2nd generation businesses fail, and like 13% of 3rd generation fail, and like 3%. So the odds are so stacked against. So I hope to, change some of those statistics as well. And it all starts by you knowing if you're an entrepreneur or not.
Yeah.
So that's the long answer to the assessment.
Once you feel you've got confirmation, I thought Glimpse, actually I was laughing a lot during Glimpse, and I actually felt like there were times that you were giving me Glimpse when I was younger.
Yes.
But I didn't see it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd love to.
It's so great.
So again, assuming you confirm you are, and as crude as this sounds, if you're not, just stop reading. Okay, you're gonna
put it away.
I'm going to do nothing but piss you off. You're going to hate me. So, but if you are, Glimpse is intended to motivate anyone that has those 6 essential traits, and certainly read on if you don't. But Glimpse, which I had no idea exactly what this was going to look like, but the idea is to show you exactly what life looks like as an entrepreneur. And it's in kind of 3 parts. And so first is helping you understand what business options there are for you. Businesses, industries, sizes. Do you want to be in a product business? Do you want to be in a service business? Are you a B2C person? Are you a B2B person? Business to consumer, business to business? Do you want a $1 million company? Do you want a $1 billion company? It's so important to understand. And so I take them through this process. And this whole journey with this book is this psychological, philosophical, soul-searching, emotional process and journey. But when you're reading that part, you start to see what you're drawn to. And so like this 125-year-old I was talking to, and he's one of my test readers, and one of my I interviewed 100 different people validating this content and digging in. But he's 25 years old, and what he knows beyond a shadow of a doubt is he wants to do some sort of in-home services. And so someday he's going to be going into subdivisions, helping homeowners, and he's going to have a fleet of trucks. So to know that is so powerful. There are 1,000 business options just in that alone. And so he might be a roofer, he might be a house cleaning company, he might be an in-home audio, whatever. But he knows that about himself, and that's so powerful because for him to start an internet business, it's probably just not something he's going to be drawn to or passionate about. And so if you have these 6 essential traits, it doesn't mean you can go start any business. There are other aspects. So there's that, and then there's stories, real life stories about entrepreneurs that were where this entrepreneur in the making was and what they built. And so that really helps create some clarity. And then the third part of this whole Glimpse thing is showing them a day in the life. And so I paint this vivid picture of both a day in the life, so a day of hell and a day of heaven, okay? So living the dream and living the nightmare is what I call it. And so I take them through this process and this vision of here's what it looks like. Here's what's possible. And then I also show them, again, the nightmare scenario, so that they can see the contrast, but the goal is to show them that it's avoidable, the nightmare scenario. And I give them 8 mistakes that entrepreneurs make and how to avoid them. And what it stems from is all of my clients that came to me. So our typical client, again, with EOS is a 10 to 250 person privately held company. And so when they come to us, they're frustrated, they're suffering from all of these mistakes they made from the past. And what these 8 things do is it helps that entrepreneur in the making see the future and head these things off at the past. Because what we're doing as implementers is we're solving these 8 silly things that this entrepreneur did. And I just believe if an entrepreneur in making knows that going in, it's going to just help eliminate a lot of those mistakes. So I had a lot of fun with that, and that just came so clear. And so that's Glimpse.
Yeah.
And so if you have the 6 essential traits, you are salivating by the time you finish the second part. Mm-hmm. And I assume we're going to the third part.
That would be great. But I wish you were more passionate about it. You seem kind of like you don't have a lot of energy.
I sold my business. I'm retired. You dragged me out of bed this morning.
Maybe I'll talk about it. I don't know. Yes, the third part, please.
So, and before I go to the third part, there's your audience can go to e-leap.com and download a free chapter. So you'll get a really good sense of all this at a high level. Because I feel like I'm afraid I'm going to miss.
Well, this is all in the show notes. It's all so you'll go right to the podcast and they can click on the link.
Perfect. Excellent.
Everything.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
So, so in the third part, I then call that path, and path is, as I've said a few times, showing them a path to take their entrepreneurial leap and become a successful entrepreneur that will make that path a lot less bumpy. And I believe I can eliminate 50% of the mistakes they're going to make. Because they're all silly mistakes and they just don't know going in. And it's fully intended to increase the success ratio of, it's terrible, less than more than half of businesses are out of business in the first 5 years, and that statistic repeats itself. So I want to try and reverse that trend. So what PATH is about is doing just that, making the road less bumpy, solving half the problems that they're about to make. And in saying that, I want to make sure I say this point well and correctly, but it's I'm wrestling between 2 points right now, so bear with me. So I'm going to come back to the second one because I want to give you the high level on PATH. And so what PATH is doing is showing them I'm sorry, I'm wrestling with two things. I'm just going to say the first one first. And so the first one is about there isn't this process or this system to become an entrepreneur. And I'm fighting a little frustration about this. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to piss a few people off when I say this because it's not a path. There's no perfect system. There's no A to Z as an entrepreneur. It doesn't exist. And it makes me crazy when people try to say that there is. But what I believe there is there are just some awarenesses that if you're just aware, you're going to reduce half your mistakes. You're going to get there. It's going to be a little less bumpy. And so if that point makes sense, I'm not going to teach the world this linear path. It's about teaching these awarenesses, okay? And so then I want to talk about, now I'll go into what the awarenesses are. And then all of that said, I say it this way. I say, an entrepreneur isn't something you do, it's something you are, okay, if that makes sense? So it's not, the madness is anyone thinking I can start a business and then next step I do this and next step I do this and next step I do this. You throw yourself into that fire. And the only way you survive that fire and get to your 10th employee is because you have these 6 essential traits. And it's a battle. You're going to war. It's crazy. Okay. So the elements of PATH are, first of all, talking about college or not. I'm very passionate about that. But what's interesting, I'm not talking them out of going to college at all. But I give some very interesting statistics. But I learned something because I used to ask all of my clients that went to college, are you using anything you learned in college in your business? And in every case, they say no. Almost every single case, like 99% of the time. And so I was biased for many years asking that question, thinking, well, why the hell would an entrepreneur go to college? Then I started asking a follow-up question in the last couple of years. And that follow-up question was, if you knew everything you knew now, would you go back to college? And surprisingly, most of them say yes. And I say, why? What were the benefits? And what they talk about are the social benefits and the interaction with other students and the ability to experiment and try things. So for what that's worth, if you're going to college as an entrepreneur, it should be more of those things. But then I give 100 entrepreneurs recommend what classes to take when you go to college. And so that's in there as well. Yep. But we address college or not. Interesting statistic, like 44% of entrepreneurs have a 4-year degree. Interesting statistic there, so less than half. But anyway, you'll read about all that there. Then what I go to is I talk about passion and how vital passion is. Because you're not going to build a business, you're not going to survive startup without passion. You've got to be passionate about your product or service, the thing. And then I walk them through how to discover their passion. And so it's really, truly a how-to manual. From there, what we talk about in PATH is mentoring and the power of mentoring and how to find a mentor. And so I kind of give a step-by-step there. And then I talk about patience. And so the next part talks about taking action but being patient. It's all about 10-year thinking. And so in my mid-30s, I learned about 10-year thinking. And when you apply 10-year thinking to building something, time slows down, you make better decisions. Mm-hmm. So we touch on that. And then I get into some how-tos, 8 insights for how to be successful in your startup. And then I talk about the 9 stages. And it's not so much a linear thing, but it's 9 things that are going to happen on your startup. And again, heading it off at the pass, creating those awarenesses so they know at each one of those stages, and again, not in a perfect linear order, but what to do at each one of those stages to better improve their success. Mm-hmm. And some percentage are still going to fail. Because it's really hard. Yeah. And that's the theme through the whole book is how hard it is. So please don't do it if you don't have the 6 essential traits. Last thing I want to say, though, because now I've pissed off half of your audience, There's something I talk about that I call the entrepreneurial range. Okay, and so this is really important because the entrepreneurial range, what I'm talking about and teaching and my messages to is for what I call true entrepreneurs. And on this end of the range is a true entrepreneur. On this end of the range are self-employed people, and they're both respectable and they're both taking risks, and I'm not knocking either one. But on that spectrum, if you think about self-employed, these are people that are freelancers, have a side hustle, they bought one franchise, they have a lifestyle business, very comfortable, making their 50, 100 grand a year, don't want to grow, those type of things. And then you go to this end of the spectrum, and these are the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, Henry Ford. So anyways, I could rattle off all the names. And so if you picture that spectrum, I'm speaking to the people on this side of the spectrum. And certainly the people on this side will get a thing or two out of this, and I'm not knocking them. Again, it's respectable. I'll say that over and over 1,000 times. But this is all about focusing on these people that are creators and growers and builders and really making an impact on the world. And that doesn't always mean big, because there are amazing entrepreneurs that built $2 million companies that throw off $1 million profit and are making a huge impact on the world. So I just want to make sure that I'm making that clear. And
You're sweating.
Am I?
No. It's like when I see you go do a talk, but the energy is really contagious. And the timing is ridiculous, in my opinion, because I do think entrepreneurship, and even if you look at all the business schools now, I mean, it used to be certain schools had an entrepreneurship track. Now it's like all of them, and they're promoting it as a reason to come to their schools. Mm-hmm. So the timing couldn't be better. In fact, they should have this in universities and colleges.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for, because the audience is an entrepreneur in the making, any age, giving them a huge jump start on taking their entrepreneurial leap. But what I really believe, there's a possibility that 50% of these copies are going to be purchased by the people who care for them, meaning parents, teachers, guardians, but also educators, professors. Because I used to knock a lot of these entrepreneurial programs in these universities because a lot of them, frankly, were bad and weren't making an impact. But now, all of a sudden, there are some good ones out there, some really good ones out there. And I'm talking to some of them. And I do hope this becomes a tool, a resource for them, because the whole business model, I'm not building another empire around this. I'm not building an organization around this. I want to get 1 million books in the hands of entrepreneurs in the making, and I'm trying to make all of these people that I will collaborate with, their lives easier, because I want them to have access to great curriculum, great content, and they win. They can make as much damn money as they want off of it, but the idea is to make their lives a little better, and their teaching a little bit better. And again, going back to that parent, if the parent's sitting there going, is my son or daughter, be great for the parent to read it because they'll understand or know, and then maybe they hand it to the son or daughter as kind of the litmus test.
So, for the entrepreneurs and for the curious, for the entrepreneurs that have confirmation, and for those that know you or know of you or whatever, and the curious, and you've had these ebbs and flows over this 30 years, right, journey or so. And then you have this defining moment on May 11th. Well, I won't call it a defining moment. Actually, it's the wrong way to say it. But you had a pretty impactful moment where you sold the business. I was thinking about this because I've known you a while. And I thought, when you do sell your business, and it kind of all comes together, and you are in a financial position that is, one that maybe some dream of. When you had that, not so much about the money, I'm just curious about, you saw it hit your account or in stages or however it happens. I'm just curious if you had a moment of reflection at any point around May 11th, 2018, right?
Yeah.
2018.
No, 19, last year. Yeah. 19. Oh, wait, sorry, 18.
Yeah.
May 11th,
2018.
Yeah.
Did you have a moment of reflection at any point in that range of time where you went,
So the first thing is, it's important to know that the day we closed, the wire transfer got lost, and for 4 days they couldn't find my money anywhere in any banking system anywhere. So the universe was teaching me some kind of lesson there.
Heck yeah. Perfect.
So you could imagine what was going through my head for the first 4 days. But anyways, they found it, they tracked it down. But you're not going to believe this because, if you look at statistically, most entrepreneurs that sell their business, they're sitting here, it's been a year, I should be depressed, drinking like a sailor, and lost. Okay, and so that's what happens to many entrepreneurs that sell their business. They've sold their purpose, their cause, their reason, and they're rudderless. That's what happened. I want to say to more than half, and I believe it's more than half.
There's a great book about that, by the way, Finish Big by Bo Burnham.
Which I've read it. It's a great book.
Yeah.
It was very helpful for me as well. But so my point in that is I am, again, thinking in 10-year time frames. I knew exactly what I was going to do. So it was great. I would have been just fine economically selling or not selling. So it was, as weird as this might sound, just another day. It was a bummer we couldn't fully celebrate the day of closing, but we still did. And my wife and I had a bottle of wine. It was great. My kids were around, so they got to celebrate with us. And so the four of us got to just really celebrate. And then, ironically, some of my son's friends came over, and it was just this perfect scenario. All the while I'm thinking, where the fuck is my money? So all that said, I don't want to say it was a big nothing, because that's grossly understating. So it was just like I was ready for the next thing, and it was a step on the path. But if I didn't have any plans for the future, if I was not the planner that I normally am and all that kind of stuff, I would have sold, I would have celebrated for a week, and then I would have felt empty and done what most entrepreneurs do. And you're right, Finish Big was very helpful in that whole thought process.
Did you have one big splurge?
Honest to God, no. I mean, it's a really good business. Okay, it's a business that throws up a 50% profit margin. I mean,
since the sale, if you had one big splurge,
no,
one thing that
I did not buy or do one thing differently in the last year that I wouldn't have already done. Any sane businessman would have told me I was crazy for selling that business. It's going to be worth twice as much 2 years after I sold it. So it's insane what I did, but it was the perfect thing for Don and I to do. So no, there's not one thing.
You and I have one thing in common, maybe others, I'm not sure, but we drive old cars. At least I think I drive an old car. Do you still drive the same old Ford that you've had?
Ford Expedition. I've been driving, this is my 6th Ford Expedition in the last 20-something years. And so what I do is I buy it, I drive it to 100,000 miles, and then I trade it in and have a new one delivered, and they're all gray. So my friends and family laugh at me.
That's why I didn't know how old it was.
They laugh at me because to me it's a little different shade of gray.
But that's once every 4 years.
So whenever I hit 100,000.
100,000 is the car. I see.
It's 100,000, somewhere between 90 and 100,000. But Ford Expedition, 20 plus years, probably more if I'm thinking of doing the math. And maybe it's not 6, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5, but 100,000 miles. Deliver me a new gray one. Now they changed the body style.
Is everything a system?
What's that?
Is everything a system with you?
I don't know. I have OCD.
I have another system.
I have OCD. I have ADD. I'm an introvert. I'm a fucked up individual.
Well, there's another system that you have, but I don't know if you'd look at it as a system, but you have certain trips that you do with certain people, certain get-togethers you do with certain people in certain intervals. It's year after year like clockwork. That's so interesting to me. Have you ever thought about that?
So
I'll give you an example.
What does that
You
mean?
and I meet at Starbucks.
Tell me how I think about that.
Well, here's how I think about it. I was talking to somebody in my family, and I said, they said, "Oh, are you good friends with Gino?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I do think Gino's a good friend of mine. It's a unique relationship, though." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, we only see each other like 2 or 3 times a year. We go to Starbucks for like 4 or 5 hours, and we just catch up. But it was like it was yesterday, but we don't really see each other any other time unless maybe there's a quick phone call. But usually that's even just to say, hey, quick question, I've got this thing and that thing or whatever. And so I've come to learn there are unique relationships in life, and that might seem unconventional to some. So I think about that with you. Do you have some other relationships like that are of,
for sure,
of an unconventional nature?
So I do consider you a dear friend, a kindred spirit. Whenever we come together, it's amazing because it's like no time has gone by and it feels like we're just picking up from the last conversation. And I would be bummed if we didn't do this for 20 more years. So when you find great people that are uplifting and fill your soul, how do you not, spend time with them? And so if we met once a week, that'd probably be overkill. But I do have, traditions or whatever you want to call them. Yeah. And so certainly there are a handful of people I meet with 2 or 3 times a year that are very uplifting and soul-filling. And then I take 3 trips a year. I take a trip to Boulder with 2 other guys. We were there last week, did our 19th year. We go for 3.5 days. We hike, we drink. It's just an amazing experience where we get grounded. And I do a Vegas trip with my buddies, which is very different than the spiritual Boulder trip, as you can imagine. And then I do a golf trip with my high school buddies, and that is the best, right? And so each one of those does something for me. Mm-hmm. And then I certainly travel with my wife, with my family, with my kids. So I do have these traditions that make me who I am. That trip to Boulder, I'm a little better and a little closer to my soul every time I come back from that trip. And it's been 19 years of, just getting a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that OCD part of you. Mm-hmm. I always have, and I've recognized that for a number of years. I've learned a lot from it as well. And, I'd just say from my heart, I love you dearly. Right back and you're really a special person in my life. For you to come out and do this means the world to me, because I know I had to twist your arm on numerous occasions to get you to be outside of the introvert a little. And I'm glad it came together. And thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
In the world,
it was a blast.
You really do.
Love you, brother.
Love you too. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.